If you're a Dodge fan and you've recently seen the company post about their all-new 2025 Charger, you might have seen some, let's just say, negative comments. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. For the first time ever, the Dodge Charger is now an electric vehicle, and today we're going to find out whether or not all of those negative comments are warranted. So let's start with our walk around of this new Charger. And if there's one area that Dodge should not receive any criticism, it is with how this car looks. First of all, can we just go back to all of those negative comments that people were giving the Charger because it was a four-door and the Charger was never a four-door? Well, guess what? The Charger is back to being a two-door. Now, they will offer a four-door version of this car starting next year, but at least for now, the Charger is back to being a two-door, and it looks just as iconic as ever, if not more. I think it looks even more like the original Charger than last year's Challenger did. You just have that really big 3/4 panel back there that just looks so cool. The wheelbase on this car is absolutely massive. It's longer than the outgoing Charger four-door, which is crazy. This is one of the longest two-door cars that we have ever seen in the United States, and we're going to see how practical that actually makes this car in just a little bit. But first, we got to start up front, where I think they've really done a nice job maintaining that muscle car DNA. You've got kind of this light bar here, which just looks so cool. These hidden headlights that are hidden under this really cool, what Dodge calls the R-wing. So this is actually a raised kind of wing here where the airflow kind of goes over the hood. It just looks super cool. We've got some really awesome color names on this car as well. This one is called Red Eye, but we've got some other great names like After Dark, Ludicrous, Destroyer Gray, and Peel Out. Those are just absolutely awesome names. We do have the 20-inch wheels here that are staggered. These are actually the biggest wheels that we've ever seen Dodge put on a Charger. So these are 20 inches here at the front, 20 inches there at the back. They're 305 Eagle F1 tires. There are 325s there in the rear. So that is really thick. I believe 305 all around was the biggest that you could get. You can get 18-inch wheels on the RT trim, which is going to be the lower trim. This is the Scat Pack, so the more performance-oriented trim, which I believe comes with these 20s as standard. You're also going to be getting a 16-inch vented Brembo brake with 6-piston front and 4-piston rear calipers. That's the biggest brake that you're going to be able to get on this car. Smaller wheels will be available as well. We do have our Scat Pack badge. He is back. Awesome looking as ever, and it does stay stage 2. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get out on the road. There's basically a stage 1 kit and a stage 2 kit. The former adds like 40 horsepower and the stage 2 kit adds like 60 horsepower. You cannot get the Charger without those, at least for this 2025 model year. So a little bit confusing there in terms of that being optional, but also you have to get it. Now, we do have the optional glass roof. Here's what it looks like from the outside. You just get a black roof as standard if you don't get that. And then here at the back, I still think it looks really great, like a really cool muscle car. We've got the Ring of Fire taillights here in the back that look really cool when they're powered on. I do think that Dodge did a great job making this look like a proper muscle car. Something also worth noting that even though we don't have any fender flares here on this car, not only is the wheelbase longer than the old Charger, it is actually wider than the old Hellcat wide body or the Scat Pack wide body. So this is just a wide, mean looking car, and it draws attention wherever it goes. The next area we're going to focus on is the interior. So we've got kind of these hidden door handles here. We've got the sportier seat because we've got the Scat Pack model here. You're going to get a less aggressive seat if you go for the RT trim level, but this is definitely the nicer of the two seats, more bolstered. We've got the red stitching here. You can also get this as a red seat as well. This is going to be the nicest seat that you can get, with the leather on the outside, suede on the inside, heated and ventilated as you'd come to expect from these Dodge products. This is a much cooler looking seat than the old Scat Pack had, but I think it still does retain a lot of that comfort. The Scat Pack and the Hellcats had some really great long distance comfort seats, and I think these definitely still live up to that, in my personal opinion. We've got a power button rather than an engine start because, of course, we don't have an engine. I'm actually going to go ahead and move us just a little bit so that the sun isn't quite glaring as much in our video here. There we go. And you'll notice that the steering wheel is more of a steering squircle, a little bit like what you get in the Corvette. Very nice perforation here. We do have paddle shifters that are going to control our regen braking. We've got our drive mode selector down here on the steering wheel itself. We've got the larger of the two gauge clusters here. So the base gauge cluster is going to be a 10.25 inch screen, but this one is actually a big, nice, massive 16 inches. 12.3 inch touchscreen is going to come standard here with Uconnect 5 infotainment. So being able to use wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, Amazon Alexa, huge upgrade over what was in the previous generation Charger and Challengers. Heated and ventilated seats are handled via touch capacitive controls here on the side, which is nice, so you don't have to use the screen for that. But we do still have nice volume knob, tuning knobs, and all of our climate controls down here as well, with kind of actual buttons, although you can see they don't really light up very bright. So indirect sunlight, you really can't see the coloration here. That is just a little bit of a problem here. We've got kind of this big pistol grip shifter. The whole back of it is kind of a big push button. Really interesting to see an EV have a traditional shifter like this, because obviously they don't really need it. Kind of a weird shape to get used to, and I found it to be ever so slightly imprecise if you're going from drive to reverse or neutral or whatever, but you'll soon figure it out. We do have a 360 camera. You can see this is just so much nicer looking than what you used to get on the old school Charger and Challenger. We do also have a wireless charger, our cup holders right here. We've got our power shot button, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we get out on the road. You can change these gauges here. There's a little button right here. So this is going to be kind of your pure gauge that doesn't have a whole lot on it. You're going to have a map one that is not showing up for whatever reason, and then you have this more traditional one, and the drive modes do actually change that a little bit as well. For example, there is a sport mode that I don't believe that you can get in any other version, any other mode. Track mode is going to put up a lap timer there, which is kind of cool. You also have some other things that you can look at, your G-forces, the top speed that you will hit. That's awesome, so you don't have to be glaring down on your speedometer to see what the fastest speed you hit. You also have just your horsepower readouts there. And then we do have a drag mode as well, so that's going to give us a different setup as well. We've got our Fratsonic logo there as well. It's worth noting that of the drive modes, the track and drag modes are reserved for this Scat Pack model. You cannot get those on the regular RT model, so just something to think about when you're selecting this car. We also have some really nice ambient lighting. It's a little bit hard to see in the day, but you can kind of see the red hue going down there. This is just like a plastic material. Looks great, but it is, kind of cheap plastic. This looks actually really great at night. Hopefully we have some nice B-roll of this car at night. We do also have an Alpine stereo, 9-speaker, 506 watt standard, 18 speaker with 914 watts is going to be what's available. Overall, I would say that this interior is so much nicer than the outgoing Charger and Challenger. It really does feel like a major upgrade in here. And believe it or not, despite this being a two-door car, it's actually super practical. Now, the old Challenger was pretty good about getting people in the back, but this is even better. You pull the strap to tilt the seat forward, and then it'll sense that, and it'll automatically slide the seat forward. You don't need to do anything else. It's all automatic, which is great. And then when we go ahead and hop into this back seat, just wait until you see this. I'm going to go ahead and put it back into my driving position. It's going to move back automatically. I'm worried it's going to bump, and then it just doesn't. Look at how much legroom I still have. This is an insane amount for a two-door car. There are over 37 inches of legroom in this car. Not even a Rolls-Royce Wraith had more than this. Unfortunately, Rolls-Royce doesn't quote how much a Spectre has, but I believe that this is a bigger back seat than you're going to get in a Rolls-Royce Wraith. It is absolutely massive back here. I can't believe Dodge was able to put this much space in a two-door car. This might start getting people to buy two-door cars again. I even have USB-C ports. I've got heated seats. I've got my own air vents. I've got everything I could possibly need back here. And the only thing that's a little bit annoying is having to tilt the seat forward to get in and out. But when it's literally as easy as pulling a strap and letting the seat do everything, and it's going to go back to the default position every time, there's almost no annoyance to it. So really good props to Dodge for doing the best back seat I think I've seen in a two-door car in a really long time. And yes, if you did count correctly, there are 1, 2, 3 seat belts back here, so you can actually put 3 people back here. And not only is the new Charger more practical when it comes to back seat space, it's also more practical here at the back. We've got 38.5 cubic feet of space. That is so much more. I think it was 16.5 in the old Charger. And that's because this car actually is a hidden hatchback. Not only is it a two-door, not only is it an electric car, not only is it huge, but look at all of the space back here. You just get so much room. You could fold down the rear seats to make it even bigger. A Home Depot run is going to be super easy in this car. There's honestly not another two-door car out there, or really ever, that is as practical. Maybe a Jeep Wrangler, but I think this actually really matches a Jeep Wrangler or a Ford Bronco in terms of practicality with how much space this thing has. And in case all of that space there in the back wasn't enough, yes, the Dodge Charger does have a front trunk. It's not the biggest, it's not super deep, it's only about 1.5 cubic feet of space. But it does have a frunk up there. You could maybe put your portable charging cable up there if you're taking a road trip, but it is there in a pinch. All right, so we're starting off in the RT trim level. This is the lower of the two available trim levels. You have the RT, and then you have the Scat Pack. But for the first model year, they're both coming with what Dodge calls their stage kits. So it's weird because Dodge tells me that these are standard for the 2025 model year, but you will see it listed as an option on your Monroney sheet. I believe it's about $1,600 for this Stage 1 kit, so that's what you're going to get standard on the RT. Stage 2 comes standard on the Scat Pack. So speaking of the Scat Pack, or of the RT, which is what we're in, you're going to get 496 horsepower and 404 pound-feet of torque. That is with the Stage 1 kit. We really don't know whether or not they're offering next year's model without the Stage 1 kit. We assume they will because it's standard for this year, but not for next year. So that should lower the horsepower by about 50 or about 40. So you're looking at 456 horsepower instead of the full 496. And I should note that the 496 horsepower rating is with something called PowerShot. That's going to add an extra boost of about 40 horsepower for about 10 seconds. So the numbers that they are quoting is with that short, brief 10-second PowerShot. That is not what you're going to be having most of the time while you're driving around. But this is still a really quick car. It is way more powerful than the outgoing RT Charger, if you want to compare it to that, with that 5.7 liter Hemi V8. I believe that was about 375 horsepower. So 496, big upgrade from that. You're going to get from 0 to 60 in about 4.7 seconds. I'm going to try to do my own 0 to 60 run to see if that number is indeed correct. And the quarter mile in this RT version should take about 13.1 seconds, which is really not that bad either. But I think what you really want to know is, does this actually feel like a Dodge Charger or even a Dodge Challenger? Because let's face it, this is a two-door. This is really replacing the Challenger more than it is replacing the four-door Charger, although there is a four-door version of this coming as well. So Dodge is really trying to diversify this product as much as it can. Now, immediately on first impression, I will say that the steering is on the lighter side, although the Charger and the Challenger were never really known for their super precise steering. The standard suspension on this, we do have a passive suspension on the RT. If you want to get adaptive dampers, you're going to have to step up to that Scat Pack model. The ride is still pretty good, even though we have the 20-inch wheels here on this car. It still doesn't bounce you around too much. I'm not going to go ahead and call it a cloud-like ride, but it's really not that bad at all. The brake pedal feel takes a little bit of getting used to. It's definitely not the same as driving a gas-powered car, but it does have a pretty nice bite to it for an EV. That's something that not every EV necessarily gets right. And we are on a really windy road here where this car just definitely feels really poised, a lot more so than I think I've really felt in a lot of gas-powered Hemi cars. They always felt like handling was kind of a chore for them. They always felt really big and very cumbersome on the road, and this really doesn't. All right, so now we've hopped out of the RT and into the Scat Pack, and this is going to be where you're really going to see a major change from the RT to the Scat Pack, both in terms of power, performance, all of that jazz. So instead of 496 horsepower from a dual motor setup, we now get 670 because we've got the Stage 2 kit. We don't know if there's going to be a version without the Stage 2 kit, but this is what we know right now. 670 horsepower. That is with the Power Shot, which is going to give you a boost of 40 horsepower, so it's really 630 when you're just driving around normally. But either way you slice it, that is a whole lot more than you got from the old Scat Pack with the 6.4 liter Hemi. That was about 485 horsepower. So this is a huge jump. It's not quite as much power as you got from the Hellcat. That was 707 horsepower, but it's not far off. You do get all-wheel drive. You do get a whole lot more weight, but this is a very, very different car from that. So it is kind of hard to compare. But if all you're looking at is the raw numbers, the performance, you should hit 0 to 60 in just about 3.3 seconds, and you should complete the quarter mile in 11.5 seconds. Now, Dodge actually does have an entire quarter mile open to us with this, so we're going to do that a little bit later. I'll try to get you an on-road one as well as give you, the actual drag strip impression as well, just so you have kind of a little bit of both to go off of there. But this is going to be a really quick car regardless of where you're driving it. Now, from driving the RT, my first thought was it definitely felt quick, but it wasn't alarmingly fast. It definitely pushed you back into your seat a little bit, but it didn't pin your head back the way that some of the fastest EVs out there will do. Now this one, we're just in the auto mode right now, and whoa, oh yeah, you can immediately tell that this is a different type of EV. There's a little bit of deadness in the throttle, but then once it kicks in, whoo, yeah, it really propels you quickly, and that is just in the auto mode. And actually, this car does have an eco mode, and I found it hilarious when the old school Hellcats had an eco mode, but that will actually disable, I think it'll mostly disable the front motor, so you're at about 300 horsepower. So that should get you the best sort of efficiency. But what I'm going to go ahead and do now is put it into sport mode. Now you can really start to hear that Fratsonic exhaust kind of take off. And now when I hit it, you hear a little bit more woo. You hear a lot more of that coming from the inside. But because we are in the Scat Pack, something the RT didn't have is track mode. So the RT only really had custom normal and sport. This one is going to add a track mode that makes it even louder. So let's go ahead and listen to that again. There's sport. There's track. So the track mode is going to be your loudest Fretsonic exhaust mode. Now it sounds a whole lot louder. It does a lot of deceleration as well. Very interesting. It definitely doesn't sound like a V8 in here. It definitely sounds like a synthesized kind of note. I mean, this is all coming from speakers, so what do you expect? The only way that you can make the RT this loud is by pushing the power shot mode. So that is the advantage of the track mode and the drag strip mode here on this Scat Pack model, is that you can get the full loudness all the time, not just for that quick 10-second burst that the power shot lasts for. Or you can go ahead and push that, and it really doesn't change the loudness because we're already at the max loudness. But it does sound really nice. And now, since I do happen to have what is basically a straight road in front of me, I'm going to go ahead and put it into the drag mode here. And let's see what we get 0 to 60 in this car with 670 horsepower. Ready? Whoa. It chirps the tires good. Woohoo! All right, so that was 3.79 seconds. So it's about 0.4 seconds off the time that Dodge says it'll do, but we do have a drag strip coming up a little bit later in the video, so there is that. Let's go ahead and put it back into the track setup here. Maybe drag just isn't the best mode to do the launch in when you don't have the full traction of a drag strip, and in fact, this road might actually have a little bit more grip, so let's try that one more time. Why not? It really, loves to get off the line as you're brake torquing it there. All right, so it is quick. That one didn't really do as good as drag mode, so there is a difference between drag and track mode because that was only 4.31 seconds. So drag mode definitely making a big difference there compared to the track mode there. So just something to take note of if you are trying to launch this car as fast as you can get. But remember, this is not the fastest version of this electric charger that's coming. We will soon get a Banshee model, which is an awesome name, by the way. That one will actually have 800 volt architecture, which is something I'm a little surprised that they're not just going to offer on all of them. I'm sure it is a cost savings to not have to put 800 volt on all of them, but that is a conversation for a different part of this video. What I want to leave you with is an impression of how this car feels out on the road. I would say the steering is fairly sharp. I mean, it's not the most precise that I've ever felt, but neither was the old Charger or Challenger for that matter. The throttle response is obviously better than either of those vehicles could ever do. And the fake sound, while cool, at least from the inside, is really not, it's not tricking me into believing that I'm hearing some kind of synthesized V8, at least not here on the inside. Maybe on the outside, I'd be a little bit more convinced because they do say that both of these are as loud as the outgoing Hellcat, which was obviously an extremely loud vehicle. We will have a chance to take this on the racetrack as well, where I'm sure I think it's going to handle better because it just has that low center of gravity. I mean, I know it's heavy, but so were those old Hellcats for sure. And I think that just the overall balance, we do have some big brakes on this car. We've got some massive 6-piston front calipers here on the track pack here on the Scat Pack. You can get smaller brakes. But I think just in terms of racing on the highway, just doing your nice little on-ramp pulls, it'll definitely do that, and it'll do it very well. And then when you just want to shut it up and you don't want all the noise, you can just turn it all off altogether, and it becomes just a nice EV. And what's wrong with that? And now Dodge has set us up at the Radford Racing School. Now this is really interesting because the Radford School already uses Chargers and Challengers from the V8 generation to teach people how to drive better. So it's really interesting. We're going to find out whether or not this new electric Charger can really hang here on the racetrack the way that you could in the old gasoline engine cars, because every time I've ever been on the racetrack in an EV, I've gotten sick. So we're about to find out whether or not I'm about to do the same here in this Charger, and it might be a really enjoyable video for you guys as I learn this track a little bit. We've got a nice straightaway here. Definitely runs out of puff there a little bit. I don't feel enough. I definitely feel like the suspension is moving around a little bit to be happy on the track. You can definitely kick the rear end out. Flat out, it doesn't feel as fast as when you're launching it. Of course, you probably are going really fast, but it does feel like I am driving a big, heavy car here. Obviously, the power is very linear. You can carry a decent amount of speed here. I do wish I had a better tire on this car. You could tell not that much grip even with all-wheel drive. You gotta go down the brakes pretty early because this is a big, heavy car. The steering is not as precise as I'd want it. I don't think this is the best track car ever, nor did I think the outgoing models were the best track cars ever, though. But for an EV, the brakes are certainly doing their job, slowing down what is a big, heavy car. And whether or not I've just gotten a little bit more used to EVs being on the racetrack, or maybe the Dodge Charger is just a pretty decent track car, remains to be seen, but it can definitely hustle around. This was not the most challenging track ever. There's not a ton of elevation. I mean, there is elevation out here in Arizona, but we're in a flat part of it right now. This racetrack isn't really like built into the mountains. But overall, I would say, compared to the V8 one, it still feels like a big car because it always was. The sensation of speed just doesn't seem to be there as much on the racetrack without the supercharged V8 whine, without the gear changes. I think that's what I missed the most being on the racetrack, being able to hear the changes, the feeling and the sensation in my brain that gives me. I think that's what I missed the most, because the sound is kind of there, but you don't have that feeling of ba-bum, 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 of interrupted power. And I know that's technically not faster, but it makes your brain feel like a lot is happening. So that is one area where I think Dodge could still learn from the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. So we saw out on the road that my 0 to 60 numbers weren't quite what Dodge said that this car could do, but now we are on a prepped drag strip, so we're going to see if that gets us there any quicker. I'm going to go ahead and put it into the drag strip mode. I'm going to use their launch control. They actually told me I might be a little bit quicker if I were to just feather the throttle a little bit and be a little bit more careful with it. But if we're being honest, I think launch control is what most of you are going to want to try. So that is what I'm going to go ahead and use as well. So we're going to get staged up here. Let's go. Let's see how quick I get this time. 3.4 seconds flat. So that is closer to what Dodge says that this car will do. 3.4 seconds dead, and according to the timer that I use, we did the quarter mile in 11.61 seconds. I'm really curious to see how accurate that is to what the drag setup here actually says. It's funny, you're driving on this kind of back road back, and you can really feel how punchy the throttle is when you're in this drag mode. So I'm going to go ahead and take it out, put it into auto, and go on the way back. All right, now it looks like my data recorder was pretty accurate. According to the time, we got 11.605 on here. Our 60 roll was 1.892. Really not that bad. Top speed of 119.5 miles an hour. So coming off of the very high highs of the racetrack and the drag strip and the skid pad, I got to talk to you about some of the more boring stuff, because it is really important, because, you know, Dodge might sell this as a muscle car first and an EV second, but it is still an EV, and you should probably know some of the important details there. We've got a 100.5 kilowatt hour battery pack. That's pretty big, not the biggest out there. It's not a 200 kilowatt Hummer, but that's going to get you about 308 miles of range on the RT trim level. That is the max, though. That is not necessarily what you're going to get if you want the big wide wheels. That is really going to hurt you. I believe you can knock that all the way down to about 268 miles. So 308 is if you get the small, skinnier wheels. 268, I believe, is what you're going to get with the wider wheels. The lowest is going to be this Scat Pack model, 241 miles of range, which is not amazing, but the only thing that we can really compare this to fairly in terms of price and performance would be the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, and that also doesn't get amazing range either. Now that car is 800 volt, and it does have the gears, which is really nice, so it does have a faster charging speed. Dodge is kind of cagey with this, but you're going to get from 20% battery to 80% battery, so not 10 to 80 like Hyundai says, 20 to 80 in 24 minutes. I believe Hyundai is 10 to 80 in like 20 minutes. So Hyundai is definitely faster there, because you're only going to peak at about 183 kilowatts on this car, at least according to the information that I was able to find on this early drive program. That Banshee model, the 800 volt car, should do a little bit better, although Dodge is not really including that for efficiency. They're including that for performance. So we'll have to see what the future holds with that. I'd say 300 miles is pretty decent for that RT, but if you want any of the performance stuff, you're going to be looking at 260 miles or less pretty much, and that might not be good enough for some customers. So that's going to wrap up our time with the all-new 2025 Dodge Charger Daytona. Let's talk about the pricing, because it is pretty interesting here. The RT trim is going to start at just under 60 grand. So you're looking at $59,595. That's before the $1,995 destination fee. This Scat Pack is significantly more. This one starts at $73,190, but as if the options are any indication, the RT that I drove earlier today, that was like 78 grand. So you can really add the options up on these cars to get them a lot more expensive. So I'm really curious to see what a fully loaded Scat Pack is going to ring out at, because when you do the comparison to a Hellcat, and this does have Hellcat levels of performance, it actually comes off as a pretty good deal, especially considering you're getting much better technology, much better build quality, and all of that stuff. But if you really just did it Scat Pack to Scat Pack, this is definitely going to be the more expensive car. I mean, of course, it's an EV. And you do get either a level 2 charging credit, or you can get credits from Free to Move for $600. I would probably take the level 2 home charger unless you happen to have one already, because you already own an EV. But I'm not 100% sure if this car really appeals to the traditional EV buyer. But here's the big question. Does the 2025 Charger Daytona speak to the current Dodge enthusiast with their Hemi V8s and their supercharged Hellcat motors? And my answer to that is probably not. If the comments that I've seen online are any indication, there is nothing, and when I say nothing, I mean absolutely nothing, that Dodge could have done to make this a slam dunk home run for some of these people. I think you could have told them that it would bring the New York Jets a Super Bowl, and the only thing that comes out of the exhaust pipe is Coors Light, drinkable Coors Light that you can serve at every tailgate party you have, and still they would find some way to hate it, and they would say, no V8, no care, on every corner of the internet. Maybe I'm just being a little too cynical, and maybe the people who are commenting on the internet are not the real people buying these cars. I do think this is a really cool vehicle. It is a fun to drive EV. I wish that some of the EV specs, you know, the charging speeds and the range were a little bit more impressive, but as we know, Dodge was never really known for efficiency anyway. So with all of that said, let me know in the comments, what would you cross shop this with? Would you cross shop it with a Mustang, a Hyundai Ioniq 5N? Let me know. And would you buy this all-electric Charger, or would you wait for one of the inline six-powered six-pack cars that should be on the market late next year? As always, if you enjoyed this video, let me know by liking this video, leaving a comment, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos. I'll see you next time.